we have forgotten where we come from. Although humanity has been able to develop innovative technologies, built expensive megacities, and has made it easy to travel to every corner of the earth with increasing ease, yet, for so many, the connection to the natural world has been broken. An estimated 56% of the world's population live in urban settings, divorced from nature. This disconnection between humanity and nature, and the belief that somehow we are distinct from the world around us, has had a devastating consequence. It has pushed us to the brink of a total environmental collapse. But I know where I come from. I remember where I come from. For some of you that don't know where Panama is, it is located in the center of the American continent. It unites North, Central America, and South America. And it's kind of a bridge between the whole continent. When Panama formed 3 million years ago, we also separated two oceans, creating the Pacific and the Caribbean Sea. I come from an area in Panama called Guna, which is in the Caribbean coast. Us, the Guna people, live in very beautiful islands that unfortunately are about to disappear because of climate change. This is our flag. In 1925, the grandfathers of my grandfathers fought a revolution because the Panamanian police didn't allow us to speak our language. They didn't allow us to wear our traditional nose ring, and they would just violate all of our rights and made us believe that we didn't have any value. They tried to make us believe that our traditions were not worth it. And that's why, in 1925, my ancestor started a revolution that allowed us to have an autonomous territory nowadays that is recognized as one of the most autonomous in the entire hemisphere. For some of you, this flag might make you think about the Nazi movement, but bear in mind that our flag is from 1925, decades before the Nazi used the swastika sign that for us represent the octopus that created the world and the 4 cardinal points in Earth. So I've been telling you about my beautiful islands. How many of you would like to go to Panama and have some vacations in this Caribbean paradise? Raise your hand. Well, I recommend you to do it soon because the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute has studied the elevation of the sea and have found out that our islands might disappear before the end of the century. Some islands are already disappearing, even though we have a 0 carbon footprint. We move with these traditional canoes. This is me in my ulu. And we have a almost negative carbon footprint. We have so much rainforest and marine ecosystems that work as carbon sink and make Panama one of only 3 carbon negative countries in the world. Yet, we have been documented as the first indigenous group in Latin America that is forced to move because of climate change. I was invited in 2014 to be a participant of the One Young World Congress in Dublin, where the former president of Ireland, Mary Robinson, was giving a speech about climate justice and climate change. And at that moment, I started finding out what was happening with climate change in my country because I didn't know much. I was chosen to represent Panama because of my work in terms of giving access to drinking water for local communities and also teaching university students about entrepreneurship. Education and drinking water were my main priorities at that time. But in that morning, I wanted to ask an interesting question about climate change. And then I realized in Dublin, in Ireland, so far from my country, that we were the first displaced indigenous people in the continent. And then I asked her, how do you tell people that they have to leave their home, to change their whole lifestyle? Because we normally just go sailing and fishing, and we have our crops, and we have a very traditional, sustainable, or what is so-called sustainable and circular economy society. How do you tell them that they have to leave everything? And then, who should be responsible for funding this movement? She wasn't able to reply. And for the last 6 years, I've been working together with the community to find answers to these questions. I'm going to tell you some decades ago. So this is me in one of many rivers of our land. When I was a kid, I was bathed with barks and herbs and flowers by my grandmother. And she told me it was to make my body and my spirit strong, and I think it worked. I was a very good student, and I was able to get a scholarship to study in Switzerland, where I studied business, international business, and tourism management, which for me at the time was very difficult because I couldn't understand the way people in Switzerland or in the cities that have a capitalism mentality, I didn't understand how they could be so selfish. So I took the opportunity to study in one of the best countries in terms of hospitality management, because there is a saying in my language that translates to something like, to dominate the spirit of the snake, you have to learn about the spirit of the snake. So I was decided to study in Switzerland, one of the most developed countries, and in terms of economics, more stable countries in the world, so I could understand how we could integrate our traditional beliefs and practices to develop, to not be left behind, and to take the leadership role that we deserve. I wanted to study tourism because since a little child, I recognized the opportunities for the economic development of our communities because of the sailing boats that would come to the islands. I remember being 5 years old and taking tourists around, explaining them how the schools of the animals out of the house would mean that in that house a hunter lived. And also explaining them how, based on our traditions, everyone would go fishing at the same time, men and women, and at the end of the day, we would share everything with everyone in the community. But now these islands are disappearing. Some people don't believe climate change is real, but believe me, it is real. And we are suffering the consequences of it. But why don't we try to use our ancestral knowledge in order to work together with science and technology? This picture is from the 60s, and this is Chief Antonio Sarco from the Embera community. He trained the astronauts that went to the moon on how to survive in the tropics. In the 60s, NASA, United States of America, came to Panama so an indigenous chief could train one of the most important missions at the time. If we did that in the 60s, why cannot we do it today? We have the power to work together, to join forces, to make technology, science, art, media, business work together with our ancestral knowledge so we can find solutions to the world's most pressing issues, which for me are climate change and biodiversity loss. Even though indigenous people represent less than 6% of the world's population, we also protect 80% of the world's biodiversity. And I'm pretty sure it's not just a coincidence. I think we have an opportunity to work together, to integrate our knowledge, to accept the benefits of technology, and to learn from nature, to reconnect with nature, so we can maybe build floating islands, and then we're not forced to move to the cities, where probably our people will start forgetting our language and forgetting our practices and traditions. We have an opportunity here to work together so that even though my islands disappear, the knowledge of my great-grandmother lives forever. Thank you very much.